where she works every day, Meredith Howard is known as a leader in global social media strategy. To her students, where she teaches social media marketing at General Assembly and St. Edward's University, she's known as Prof. G. But to me, she's known as a very good friend named Mare. I am so excited to have the chance to introduce her today. Meredith, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
Y'all, Meredith Rose Howard.
Thank you, darling. Wow. Hey, everyone. It is an absolute honor to talk today about resilience. Now, I think it's particularly poignant that we're talking about resilience after living through what we've lived through over the last 16 months. To be honest, I'm almost a little intimidated because I think that anyone on this phone call today could talk about resilience, could share their story and their journey, whether it was before the pandemic or certainly over the last year. I also want to acknowledge that the fact that we're all here today, that we are joining a community, trying to connect virtually, right? Even shows that we all have a level of resilience. And for that, I think that we should all kind of give ourselves a little pat on the back, because it takes a lot to put away some of the personal or professional shit that you're going through and show up. So thank you for being here. Now, this word, resilience, has become really relevant in the past year. And when I told my mom that I was going to be speaking on this topic, she, who is a nurse of 30 plus years, reminded me that the medical community is actually grading resilience now in mental health assessments, right? So in the same way that we can measure depression scales or recalling information, we can now be graded on resilience. For me, resilience is a word that goes way back, right? We've kind of had our ups and downs, a tumultuous relationship, if you will. But it was always a word that I was drawn to. It was a word that I admired and appreciated even before I think I fully understood it. So my hope is that today we can celebrate it, and we can celebrate the impact that it's had on each of our own creative journeys. So let's get into the brass tacks of it, shall we? Resilience, when you read about it, is often found in close proximity to words like trauma, adversity, failure, want, right? Because one cannot exist without the other, which is a huge bummer, right? Because resilience is awesome. It's what we all strive for. It's why we're here, right? But adversity, failure, trauma, they sort of suck. So in preparation for today, and with that spirit in mind, I decided that I would go back and I would write down all of the moments in my life of trauma, adversity, and failure. It's a really uplifting exercise, guys. I highly recommend it. Now, in all honesty, I hated it. And it wasn't because I was scared of reliving these moments that were really hard in my life, that they would make me sad. I was aggravated by it. I was aggravated by the passivity of it all. Because that's what these things are, trauma, right? It just sort of happens to us, and we just have to sit there and experience it. We're passive recipients of these hard things in our life. But I did the exercise anyway, and I want to share a little bit about what I found. Throughout my life, I've been experiencing a lot of trauma, failure, and adversity. When I was young, I was experiencing my parents getting divorced, not unlike many children of baby boomers in the 90s, right? And then I experienced my mom getting remarried to a woman, which is slightly unlike a lot of children of baby boomers in the 90s. My family falling apart, my parents' tumultuous remarriages, my entire adolescence being completely consumed in this made-for-TV melodrama where I, the only child, this 11-year-old, became disproportionately responsible for managing the feelings and emotions of my adult parents. Trauma. Then later on, I experienced the impact of the recession. Graduating from school at the most perfect time, where I was completely underpaid, very overeducated, I experienced losing my job. Not because I did anything wrong, although it was a bit of a head scratcher at 22, right? Like, I thought that losing your job was synonymous with being bad at your job. I didn't understand. I thought that maybe you had to at least have stolen something or broken the law, right? I didn't know you could lose your job just because. Now, over the years, I lost my job 2 more times. And so it became very clear. I was completely replaceable, completely redundant. And that's just the way it was in business. I couldn't manage to do what I had spent 5 years collectively of undergrad and grad school learning how to do. Or at the very least, I couldn't convince someone to pay me consistently for it. Failure. And then I experienced love. Real love. Again, like many of us do when we step out of the fog that is college, right? And we become fully formed humans who can have rational feelings, right? And I just so happened to experience love with a black man. Now, that may mean nothing to you, but it meant something very significant to members of my family. You see, his skin color was threatening. And us being together was threatening in a way that unfortunately many of us have become all too familiar with. This racism from people that I have loved my entire life was something I was not prepared for. It was new to me. We started our relationship unaccepted, not welcome by many important people. We were treated as a secret, something to be tucked away, ashamed of, and it remained that way for 6 years. Adversity. This is my shit, okay? Because we're getting real this Friday morning. And I don't say this to garner any sympathy, right? I say this because you can't talk about resilience without talking about the shit. I also realize that these hard things like trauma, adversity, failure have been nothing but consistent, right? They're like an annoying toddler that keeps tugging at you, poking at your leg, asking you why. I don't have kids, but I imagine that's what it's like. I'm sure they're lovely too, as well. So what I'm saying is that my life has been a steady poke of hard things. Perhaps you can relate, right? Because it's subtle. I can't point to one massively traumatic thing in my life, just consistent pokes. And it sort of never ends, right? 17 years after my parents' divorce, and I'm negotiating feelings being hurt in my wedding dress as I'm about to walk down the aisle. 6 years into the most secure job I've ever had, and I wake up at least once a week questioning my importance, questioning my relevance, thinking surely they're gonna figure out that they don't need me. And 10 years into walking hand in hand with this man, because you know I married him, y'all. And I'm triggered by the looks, the subtle microaggressions, the fear of anyone or anything hurting him or us because we're different. Here's the thing. People we often associate with being resilient are people who've experienced the worst of the worst, right? People who've been abused, parents who've lost children. Those things would put the bullshit that I just divulged to you to shame, right? People who've suffered this incredible loss and felt an unimaginable pain, those are the stories we grasp onto when we think of resilience. And the reason we do is because it's important to, because the stakes are so high with those people, right? To recover, they must be resilient. They have no other choice. Sometimes it's literally death or be resilient. I'm not one of those people. I, probably like many of you, can live and go about our life without being resilient, and it's fine. It's okay. don't think you need to be one of those people to be resilient. You just have to choose. And then you gotta do the work, like anything. You gotta strengthen the muscle. And for me, I have to decide and work every damn day. It turns out that consistent poke, it needs consistent poking back. So, if we know that shit sucks, then what do we do about it? What do we choose to do about it? I'm going to share 2 valuable strategies with you that have helped me realize my own resilience. The first takes practice, the second takes some creativity. So I know that you guys are the people for it. Are you ready? Seeing nods, hopefully. I got nods from my audience here. So the first thing, I didn't actually have a word for until about 2 years ago when I was sitting in my therapist's office, as one does, and I was sharing yet another frustration about an experience that I was having with my family and my husband, and she asked me how I was coping with this frustration. And I said something to the effect of, well, you know, we had agreed to this thing that we were gonna do, and now it's really not working out. So now I know next time I won't agree to that thing. Now I know what's not good. And she looked at me and she said, do you do that a lot? And I looked at her and I said, do what? And she said, benefit finding. And I said, I know what those 2 words mean. I don't know what they mean together. What does that mean? She then explained to me that it's actually a common tactic in psychology that therapists will use to help their patients cope with trauma, failure, and adversity. It's the practice, listen here, of intentionally shifting your focus toward an emphasis on a positive consequence from a negative event. It's a trait now used to measure levels of resilience. In that moment, I had a word for something that I did in fact do a lot. When I can focus, I can find the benefit, but it's a daily practice. So let me show you some examples, right? So when I can focus, I can appreciate that when my parents divorced, I actually grew closer to each of them. Our relationship, while potentially dysfunctional, in all honesty, grew in spite of it. When I can focus, I saw that losing my job forced me not to coast early on in my career. I couldn't. I had to pay the bills. I had to hustle. I had to constantly work on rebranding and branding myself again, putting myself out there, making myself be excellent when I really wasn't excellent yet. I don't know if that work ethic would have happened otherwise. And when I can focus, I can thank the people who made me question the choice to be with my husband, for never making my relationship one of convenience. Because y'all, on the day of our wedding, I was so sure. I was so incredibly sure. A sureness that only comes from being challenged so intensely, right? That felt really fucking good. Call it putting lipstick on a pig if you want, right? But it works. So let me pose the question to you all. The last shitty thing that happened to you, the shitty thing that's happening right now to you, if you made the decision to find the benefit, could you? Could you? The second thing is what I've come to call finding my creative constant. Realizing resilience actually takes a lot of mental gymnastics, right? That when you think about it, creative people are actually uniquely qualified for, right? Because creativity takes a lot of mental gymnastics. Your creative constant is your counterattack to the trauma, to the failure, to the adversity. It's the thing that you can do that quiets your mind. It allows you to create and cope at the same time. But it needs to be constant. So when I was realizing my own creative constant, I looked at all the constant pokes, right? And I tried to find the other constants in my life. And then it became very clear. Remember when I lost my job all those times, right? When I lost my job the second time, I was in a really deep, dark place, okay? I was 24 years old. I was really primed for that quarter-life crisis that was coming down the road, right? I was going from interview to interview, talking to recruiter after recruiter. I felt as though I couldn't find my way. Now, meanwhile, during these months of self-pity and unemployment, I would sit at brunch with my friends, all of whom maintained gainful employment throughout this entire time, remarkably, right? And I'd listen to their stories, not about work because they were bored by that. They had that on autopilot, but about men, their relationships. They would talk about the latest asshole they met on Tinder that took them out and then never called them back, right? Real stereotypical stuff at 23. I found myself relating to them oddly, though. Not because of the romantic relationship I was in, but because of all the crap that they had experienced with these men, I was oddly experiencing with these jobs that I was dating, right? So one night, after a few too many glasses of wine, call it a bottle, okay? No judgment zone, I heard here. I took out my laptop and I started writing. I wrote about the parallel tales, comparing men to jobs, careers to relationships. Now, this was not an uncommon occurrence. The writing, not the drunk writing, that was lesser so, okay, promise. And writing was something that I had always done. My creative expression, my therapy. I found radical honesty in it. I can't bullshit myself on the page. I write everything I'm thinking. When I was young, particularly in the years following my parents' divorce, I would write constantly, mostly journal entries, right? Gosh, if I could find some of those, right? But then I'd also write letters to my parents and just never give it to them. As I got older, my writing became a bit more introspective. I love this idea of telling a very normal story alongside my inner monologue. Writing was my version of talking to myself, the good, the bad, the ugly, the very messy. In my writing, I worked through my shit. It's present in every hard time in my life. When no one was watching or reading, right? It was my creative constant. Now back to the drunken night at my laptop, because I know you're like, how did that end? If it were any other night, I might have just written until I was tired enough to pass out. But for whatever reason, this night, I slapped a title on this piece of writing and I sent it to my friend. She was the creator and founder of a women's blog in Chicago at the time. Now in the morning when I woke up, slightly hungover, I got an email from her and she said, oh my God, Meredith, get me your bio and your headshot immediately. I'm publishing this on my site today. The article was titled, Job Offers and Bad Boyfriends. After this article published, I started writing more for her blog on this topic, working through my shit, right? I finally got another job, and then like clockwork, a year later, I got fired. But this time was different. When the HR person called me into the room and she gave me the standard script, you know, severance, blah, 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 it's not you, it's us, blah, 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 right? It sucked. But the words sort of bounced off of me. They kind of ricocheted in a way that they hadn't done before. I wasn't horribly devastated like years past. I actually remember thinking, I can't wait to go home and write about this. About a month later, I launched a blog for myself. It was called Job Offers and Bad Boyfriends. It was and remains one of the best things I've ever done, professionally, but also personally. My writing, which for many years remained just a personal relationship with myself, actually became my brand. People called me a writer, something I became known for, something I feel is part of my identity today. It's what's made me who I am today. Academics who have studied the effects of writing have said it's actually a proven way to combat trauma. When you begin to write about your emotional pain, you're controlling it instead of it controlling you. Makes sense? I guess that's how I felt, right? But I would go so far to say that it's not only true for writing, it's true for whatever your creative constant is. Dr. Lucy Hone, who studies resilience and well-being in the UK, She says that one of the strategies for building resilience is having immense clarity on what helps you versus what hurts you. So what helps you? Or I should ask, what helps you in the way that writing helps me? Maybe it's running, maybe it's cooking, or drawing, or making, or developing, or brewing. This is a game changer, y'all. For as long as I'm tapping into my creative constant, I'm in control. I can overcome, I can find the benefit, I can realize resilience. So in the words of Oprah Winfrey, because you know I can't go a talk without mentioning the Queen, right? Here's what I know for sure. The trauma, the failure, the adversity, it will be constant. That is a given. So step one, discover what helps you. Find your creative constant and tap into it. Step two, do it consistently, practice. In other words, poke the fuck back. Thank you, everyone.
We've got time for Q&A. If anybody needs to head off to either their job or their dating life, feel free. But if you've got a question for Meredith, you can put it in the chat. You can raise your hand, and Anne, our director, will spotlight you if you want to ask your question, or I can read it off the chat. All right. So I'll get the ball rolling. I'm curious, Meredith, what was your first job that you've been fired from?
Oh, yeah. It was at an agency in Chicago. I had interned all throughout college, hoping that would make me more marketable. Turns out it didn't fucking matter. But I had I started as a content specialist at an agency in Chicago, and I was working on B2B clients and I'm not bullshitting y'all. I lost my job literally because we lost the client, right? And just, of course, that makes sense now. Just as at 22, I thought you had to break the law to lose your job. I didn't understand that things ebbed and flowed in business, and you just, you were indispensable, basically, or dispensable, I should say.
So another question.
Yeah.
Thinking about that life journey of resilience. How has it played out for you, your writing and that creative constant during this past year of 2020 and this whole pandemic and everything that we've all gone through together?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the pandemic was hard. It's been hard. But the thing about resilience is when you start to practice it daily, things that are bigger, like a global pandemic, you're able to kind of cope better, right? It's just when you have that daily practice. So the pandemic it impacted me, right? But probably not in the most severe way that it impacted a lot of people on the phone or even, more broadly. The events of the past year that really stick out actually are more so tied to the Black Lives Matter movement, the killing of George Floyd, and the impact on my family because of that. And so I actually started writing again, more publicly. I always write personally, but more publicly about the aftermath of that movement and how it made me feel fearful, frankly, scared about my husband, my future children, right? And that actually gained some traction, and I shared it with my company. And they actually asked me to lead a internal group on DE&I, given sort of my passion. So I feel like writing personally has always been therapeutic. Every time that I've decided to put my creative constant out in the world, and just be really radically honest, it's helped professionally as well. So it has this kind of dual benefit to me, and it continues to do so. So that's what I'm writing about more now, is that, which has been an interesting journey and pivot for me.
I'm so glad you mentioned that point about bringing it to your company, because I think that's something that so many of us as individuals, as employees and companies are struggling to deal with. Everybody, the ideal is that you bring your whole self
Right.
Everything you do. And for so many, for all of the reasons that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
How did your coworkers or in an individual one-to-one, not to pry too much, but how did people react to that individually, do you think?
I was really scared, actually, because I had shared some of my writing, particularly this piece that I wrote about a week after the protests after George Floyd. And I shared it on my social media, as I do, but I didn't share it on LinkedIn because that's where my professional network is. And I waited about like a week to do that. And then I just said, fuck it. Like, this is important. This isn't just personal. This companies need to step up and figure out how to make the workforce more equitable. So I shared it. And, I feel very lucky. My company was very responsive towards my position, right, on the matter. Many of my colleagues actually said that it inspired them to make donations to Black Lives Matter. It inspired them to get more involved in whatever internal, mechanisms we have in the DE&I space. So I'm very proud of that. There were probably people who were like, why is she sharing this shit? And I feel fortunate that I didn't get a sense of that really, or it was just hidden from me. But I took that risk knowing that could be the case. And to be honest, the adversity, I've heard the worst of the worst from people that are very close to me. So you kind of can't scare me at this point when it comes to that.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I think Kim has a question. Can we spotlight Kim so she can ask herself?
Hi, Meredith. Thank you so much for your talk. So we have the writing as a creative constant in common. So I'm always curious about writers' sort of personal routines around, their practice. And if maybe you can talk about that.
So I will say that I'm most prompted to write when I'm going through something, right? That's when I will fully kind of formulate an idea and write more. But for me, it's just about making it a daily practice in any way, shape, or form, whether it's taking a lot of time to write an email to a friend, right? Or sharing it doesn't have to be a piece of writing in the traditional sense that you're going to publish as an article. Mm-hmm. When I'm writing a note to my family or my friends, I take just as much care in that, right? And that usually happens more frequently than writing a fully fleshed out article. But my friend, one of my best friends, for Christmas last year, she got me this book, and it's kind of weird that she gave it to me. It feels like something I would give to people, but it was a prompt a day. And it's just this book that has prompts, writing prompts, just to get your mind going. And that's easy for me to just kind of keep up with the practice, right? And it's all about doing it consistently, right? Exercising that muscle, you get stronger over time.
Thank you so much.
No, thanks, Kim.
Cool. We have a question and some joy from Megan. Let's take a look at what Megan's got going on.
It's a party over here, celebrating resilience.
Yes.
Meredith, thanks so much for your story. I was wondering, since you're an educator, how do your students feel about entering today's job market, and what's your advice for those just starting out?
Oh boy. I get messages from my students almost weekly about advice asking for this, right? So the job market is tough right now. I think that what I will say is that a lot of my students have understood that it is different. And we really, we had a little moment of recovery there, but really since I even graduated, it's been hard. And particularly the industry of marketing, which is the one I'm in, it is extremely competitive, right? And so the advice that I give to them is just keep learning, right? Even if you're outside of school, right? Because many of them are graduating, just continue to find ways to learn, because no one can take that away from you, right? And so whether it's learning through working, in sort of an apprenticeship environment, or, they didn't tell me to say this, but doing Skillshare classes that are more applicable to I taught on Skillshare, so I also have a connection there, but that are more applicable to more specific job tactics, because in school you learn a lot of like theory and concepts, but like some of the tactical stuff, getting trained in certain, technology systems, like these are all the things that I recommend. Like while you're looking, make that your full-time job, right? But do these other things too. Don't ever stop that process of continual learning. And then candidly, I try to connect them where I can. And I always emphasize the power in networking. If you're a student and you don't have a job, come to a place like this, meet us here, show up, right? There's resources for them. And so I try to expose them or make those available to them too. It's a really good question though. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for the plugs, Meredith. No, but it's really good. That sense of connections and Creative Mornings, we don't use the word networking very often because that's not our vibe. But it really is true. Making those connections, that's how things happen. People want to help people, so so ask and reach out and help others when you can. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, can I
hear the voice of our co-host Ben. Ben, what do you got for us?
Can I ask a question of Meredith?
Please.
Hug or high five?
Hug, always.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
a part of Creative Mornings.
Look at that. Where in the world is Ben Toma? He is a traveling man. That's so beautiful.
Yo, this is a small town. This is a small town.
Oh.
Meredith,
I'm still here. Okay.
You get to still be here.
You were
I don't
taking
know.
the stage.
I don't know.
I didn't know.
I love taking the stage. Brian will tell you all about that. But I was going to say, I don't know if there are more questions, but I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this community. We are so close to getting back together. Get your vaccine, people.
Should we do it in my backyard next time?
We should. If y'all don't get the chance to today, sometime in the future, you should contact Meredith and see if you can just dip your toe in her pool here in the backyard. It's a lovely place. Hopefully, corporate America doesn't overtake it and give you some incredible offer to make this a coffee shop in the near future.
Yes.
But we'll see. Brian, I can't see the chat. I don't know if there's more questions, but
no, I think we're good on questions. Just a couple of closing notes. Link in the chat for a survey. Give us feedback. What did you think today? What can we do better? What did you love? What did you hate? That's how we get better at making you better. And then really just wanted heartfelt thanks to all of our volunteers. Nobody gets paid for this. And they show up for you, for us, for each other to make this magic happen every month. So huge thanks to our director and our assistant director, Kaylee. They've been back there making all this coordination happen. And in the chat, we've got Kim and Brittany bringing you all the good cheer and the links. And Marty, I mentioned behind the lens, Henry Invisible, our house band, Ben Toma, my co-host. I'm Brian. It's such a joy to bring everyone together like this. We really look forward to seeing everyone again.
All right, we're going to bring everybody in here. This has not been a small effort. You've got Q, you've got Rosie, who's helping out with kisses. You've got Robin, who's our typical prize control, and here's Marty. It takes a fantastic crew. Thank you to everybody who makes Creative Mornings happen, and thank you so much for being here and being a part of Austin's creative community.
Awesome. So Henry, you mind playing us out, man? Get those vibes going into the weekend.
I got you. Hey.
All right. Everybody's welcome to hang out, do a little dance if you want to feel the vibes. Everybody enjoy your day. Have a creative morning.
Man. I still want to see you set up. You sound like a great
It's awesome.